This book, Slow Productivity by Cal Newport, is the answer to hustle culture. So often we define productivity in terms of quantity of items produced, or worse, perceived busyness. Like how many hours we spend at our desks, or how many widgets a factory produces in an hour, or even worse, how many posts on social media you make in a week. But this relentless focus on output optimization and efficiency is frankly exhausting. I can't be the only one that is so tired of juggling so many different responsibilities and just wants to retreat into a cabin in the woods and make art. If you look at the people that made a living with their minds throughout all of human history, people like Galileo and Jane Austen and Isaac Newton, people that changed the course of human history, or whose creative works we're still talking about hundreds of years later, we find a very different way of looking at productivity than the relentless busyness and hustle culture we're used to now. These people didn't try to have it all, do it all, or be everywhere. As Cal Newport writes, they took things slow. They focused on creating meaningful work over the course of their lifetimes. Slow productivity is based on following three core principles, and the first is to do fewer things. There's this myth that Jane Austen wrote her books on little note cards in between dances and was somehow able to find time to write amongst an incredibly busy social life. This is just not true. It's just complete garbage. It's a random myth that her nephew created. Cal Newport explains what really happened, according to primary sources in the period, is that Jane Austen and her entire immediate family eventually left London and moved to the countryside, retreating from basically all social obligations. He writes, suddenly, almost miraculously free of most responsibilities, both domestic and social, Austen, for the first time in over a decade, had gained real and meaningful space to think and work creatively. And it was during this period that Jane Austen was able to finish absolute literary masterpieces like Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Mansfield Park, and Emma. Austen was completely unable to produce creative work during the crowded, busy periods of her life. Newport writes that it was only when her obligations were greatly reduced that Austen was able finally to complete her best work. Work that, mind you, are widely considered to be some of the best romance novels of all time, and are considered to have completely transformed English literature. Julia Quinn would likely have never created Bridgerton if it hadn't been for Jane Austen's family retreating to this country cottage, finally giving her time and space to do the work she found most meaningful in her life. And yes, it is probably genuinely impossible for a lot of us to retreat into a little cabin in the woods and have the financial resources to liberate ourselves from most of our responsibilities, but it's something to aspire to. It's a North Star to guide us. Think about the ways that you could reduce your obligations in your own life, eliminating busy work and meetings where you can have more time to focus on the things that actually matter to you. And I've been thinking a lot about how I can do this in my own life. Sometimes it might not be possible to reduce your obligations, at least immediately. You do usually have the ability to contain these tasks, though, or control over how many things you focus on at one time. I don't currently have anyone helping me run my business, so I'm responsible for all of the tasks that I have to do every single week, and it's a lot more than just making these videos, sadly. And something Newport suggests in the book that I actually really like is this idea of running tasks on autopilot. This means you can take any regularly recurring tasks and assign them to specific times and days each week, even the same location every single time, making it into a ritual. I think it's worth reading some sections of this page out loud on page 84. A key refinement to support this task-centric version of autopilot scheduling is to leverage rituals and locations. If you can connect a regularly recurring task block to a specific location, maybe with like a little ritual, you're more likely to fall into a regular rhythm of accomplishing the work. Containing tasks isn't about escaping the small. It's instead about making these efforts as painless as possible. I won't be able to fully get rid of answering emails and taking meetings here and there, but what I could do is schedule all of that admin work for specific periods throughout the week, like spending 30 minutes on Mondays to answer emails if you're at a coffee shop. I could even turn that into a bigger admin work session, something I'd normally dread into something that I would look forward to by treating myself to a hot chocolate and a little pastry, maybe even having a friend over and doing a little Pomodoro timer work session. And by getting all of that admin overhead off of my plate and out of my mind for the rest of the week, I'll be able to schedule more uninterrupted blocks of focused work, doing things that I get a lot out of, like making art and designing new products. Cal Newport has a bunch of really practical suggestions in the book for how to reduce your obligations and narrow in your focus that can apply to anyone, from a self-employed creative like me to someone working a corporate 9-to-5 or a parent trying to turn a hobby into a business. There was one that I really liked, though, as evidenced by my having underlined almost the entire page while reading, and it's this suggestion of having a holding tank and an active project list. The idea here is to separate your endless to-do list into two sections. Number one, the holding tank section. This is where every new task goes by default. Big projects, small projects, one-off tasks, it all goes here. And number two, the active section. This is where stuff you're currently working on goes. Limit it to a maximum of 3 big projects, but try to only work on one of them a day. And as you finish things, they leave the active part of your list. And then, and only then, you pull in something new from the holding tank. I personally get really overwhelmed when I see a huge list of things that I have to do, but I think simulating a more pull-based workflow would eliminate a lot of that stress. Every task is still being tracked, so nothing's going to get left behind, but the amount of work that you're expecting of yourself in any given workday is a lot more manageable. You could even make this list public. If you offer commissions, for example, you could have a Trello or a Notion board that tracks the various stages any given commission could be at, like in the sketch phase or awaiting client approval, and then share that board with all of your clients. No more back and forth emails and where the project is at, and full transparency on when someone can expect you to start on their commission. And that brings us to the second principle of slow productivity. Number 2, work at a more natural pace. Don't rush your most important work. Allow it instead to unfold along a sustainable timeline with variations in intensity and settings conducive to brilliance. When it comes to our understanding of productivity, Cal Newport writes, time scale matters. When viewed at the fast scale of days and weeks, the efforts of historic thinkers like Copernicus and Isaac Newton can seem uneven and delayed. When instead viewed at the slow scale of years, their efforts seem undeniably and impressively fruitful. The great scientists of past eras would have found our urgency to be self-defeating and frantic. They were interested in what they produced over the course of their lifetimes, not in any particular short-term stretch. It might sound really silly, but I found this reframe to be a little bit of a revelation. I struggle with this intense pressure I feel to become a better artist as fast as possible, to churn out new work every single week, if not every few days, and gain all of this experience and knowledge as fast as possible. Part of this is expectations other people have of me and the work that I share online, their opinions and their feelings, but a bigger part of it is my own expectations. But what value is there in rushing? What do we get out of giving into this pressure to grind with little to no relief? And wouldn't it be better if we were able to let projects take just a little bit more time? If we stopped being so overly ambitious with our project timelines and didn't try to maintain a fundamentally unsustainable expectation of constant productivity and progress? And what if we as a culture and as a community stopped trying to hold each other to these unsustainable expectations? I primarily make my living from sharing my work and my journey as an artist on the internet. And I actually really like having a content-centric business because it means that I can let my oil paintings unfold at their own pace. If I don't have a particular piece finished because I'm stuck and I have to stare at it for a week to figure out what to do next, I can take that time. Increasingly, I've been thinking less and less about process videos covering single pieces, and more on pursuing this idea of cinematic videos covering the entire creative journey, from initial inspiration to maybe an entire collection of work even. And one thing I've been playing a lot with in my own life is this concept of seasons. Seasons of focusing on different projects or prioritizing some things over others. There is just so much that goes into growing a business or mastering a skill. And if we're to take Newport's advice and both work at a more natural pace and take on fewer projects, you might find it really useful to deliberately design these seasons of your life with intentionality. Maybe taking the next 3 months to study color theory or the work of one particular artist that you really admire, or doing a deep dive into just one book. That might take you a lot closer to your art goals than trying to study a ton of things all at once. And as Newport writes, working at a natural pace is not only more sustainable and more humane, it's also arguably the better long-term strategy for producing results that matter. There will always be more work to do. You should give your efforts the breathing room and respect required to make them a part of a life well lived, not an obstacle to it. A seasonal approach to work, I think in this context, means varying the intensity and the focus of your efforts throughout the year. Maybe you spend 3 months out of the year preparing for your new big creative projects, right? So you thumbnail and sketch for a new graphic novel or a new painting collection, and then you spend the 6 months after that trying to devote all of your available energy to executing that project, to actually getting that work done in the time that you have, and maybe even documenting it. And then the last 3 months of the year could be spent getting that work out there into the world, right? Sharing it with people, selling it at events, pitching literary agents, or showing at galleries. Obviously, projects like books take usually longer than a year, but it's a good example, I think. In the book, Cal Newport talks about some of the most productive periods of Georgia O'Keeffe's life, an incredibly famous modernist painter. The most productive and prolific periods of O'Keeffe's life was the 16-year time frame where she retreated away from New York City and spent summers at this remote Adirondack estate with her husband. During these summers, she took life slow. She would take long walks around this lake and hike around and paint out of this converted farm outbuilding thing, this shed, I guess. And during this time, she produced over 200 paintings and countless sketches. And when fall would roll around, she would pack up all of the work that she made that summer, add finishing touches, and then exhibit and sell them in the city. And through embracing this seasonality and the slowness and taking her time, O'Keeffe was able to make the work that catapulted her to celebrity status in the art world. The idea of scheduling out slow seasons or planning for some kind of variation in intensity of my work throughout the year is really appealing to me. I don't currently have the ability to take 3 months off. Probably very few of us do, but I think it's something to work toward. And as I begin planning for this next year and figure out the projects that I want to work on and the things that I want to commit to, I really want to see if I can figure out a way to take a month or two off throughout the year. If I can make that happen in my schedule, I think it would be really good. And by the way, a slow season doesn't have to look like taking the entire month off. It really could just mean focusing on only the absolute essential things to get done. Unlocking even more free time that you can use to pursue the things that you're more passionate about. Newport has a few ideas for how to implement what he calls small seasonality, or more modest efforts to try and work at a more natural pace in your own life. Keeping at least one day entirely free of work meetings, taking random weekdays off once or twice a month, to do something that's really just for you, are all little acts of self-care that you can do to reduce the stress associated with our current really intense work culture. If you've read The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, it's very similar to the idea that she talks about of taking yourself on an art date every week to fill your creative cup. Slow productivity encourages us to do fewer things, to work at a natural pace and create seasons in our lives. And one tangible, practical way to apply these principles is to simplify parts of your daily routine that consume time and energy, like meal planning and preparation. I have used Factor, the sponsor of this video, for years. Having chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals show up right at my door ensures that I treat my body right even when I'm busy with work or just want to spend that week painting instead of meal prepping my lunches. And this past week I had chicken pot pie pasta and blackened salmon with smoked Gouda cauliflower grits, and the meals were delicious. And this coming week I'm having roasted garlic butter salmon and herb-crusted chicken, and I'm honestly kind of hyped. There's no prep, no mess, just delicious meals that have really high quality ingredients. And the only dishes that you have to do after are a single plate and fork. It's like a dream come true for me. I hate dishes. On top of meals for lunch and dinner, they also have easy breakfast options and plenty of vegan and vegetarian things to choose from, all at a price that's way cheaper and more reliable than getting traditional delivery. Head to factor75.com or click the link in the description. Use code KelseyR50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your first month of orders after. The third core principle of slow productivity philosophy is to obsess over quality. This is the glue that holds everything together. Newport writes, "Obsess over the quality of what you produce, even if this means missing opportunities in the short term. Leverage the value of these results to gain more and more freedom in your efforts over the long term." If we want the freedom to embrace seasonality, work at a more natural pace, and do fewer things, we need to become known as people that produce incredible quality work. This obsession over the quality of the core activities in our professional life gives us the leverage that we can use to achieve that seasonality and that narrower focus. Become known for excellence, and people suddenly become way more willing to tolerate an eccentric schedule and accommodate your slower way of working. The core activity that you should be focusing on is going to vary from person to person, of course. It's likely going to be art and one other thing if your goal is to turn your creative practice into a business for yourself. For me, it's both my art and the quality of videos that I produce. I'm not just talking about production quality, but the actual skill of sparking interest and capturing attention in a way that's compatible with my values. And luckily for me, getting better at both of those skills is a process of self-discovery and personal and creative development. And as I've come more into my own as a creative person, I've gotten better at these skills. Take a look at the videos that I was making in the very beginning, very beginning. There's a dramatic change in the quality of my content and my art over time. For someone writing a graphic novel, this could be both their art and their ability to write and craft a really compelling story. And as soon as you begin to obsess over quality, developing better and better taste and wanting to bring your vision to life, you realize that now you need that slowness. If I eventually want to be making really compelling 2-hour-long studio vlog videos about an entire collection of work, I need the time and the space to do that. Those videos are never going to come together in the space of 2 weeks. Maintaining a weekly upload schedule would be a total nightmare. But that narrower focus, working at a more natural pace, those become necessary conditions to creating an environment conducive to excellence, to the skill development that you need to maintain that excellence. Unnecessary busy work becomes completely intolerable, and containing those little admin tasks that eat so much time in your day becomes a necessity. I think our intense longing for more rest in our lives, more breaks from the endless corporate monotony, or even the hustle culture that's so often very inherent in entrepreneurship, speaks to how toxic and frankly inhuman our current work culture is. I agree with Cal Newport. I think it's time for something slower. And I would love to make more videos on this book and the concepts that we talked about today. How to apply them to our lives in tangible, practical ways. How to plan your months and your weeks using a slow productivity philosophy. If that's something that you're interested in, leave a comment. Let me know. I've also been posting a lot of videos lately featuring my art more heavily, and I'd love it if you watched them. I'll put one on the screen right now, and I really hope to see you there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.